Okay, so we are now on to our conversation with our speaker. Rosemary Blizzard has served in North Carolina as Director of Elections in Duplin County, which I may be saying wrong and she can correct me. She was State Director of Voter Registration in 2004 and 5, and District Election Technician with North Carolina Board of Elections. Rosemary has worked directly with North Carolina's 100 county election boards as they implemented state policies, along with major election reforms such as HAVA, Help America Vote Act. Prior to joining the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center in 2019, Rosemary also served as the election director for Wayne County and, as a change of pace, as a staff accountant for a full-service CPA firm. So while we are all muted, I just wanted to assure Rosemary that if we weren't muted, we'd all be clapping and giving her a warm welcome to our Zoom meeting here. So we're going to go ahead and have you share your screen now, and somebody gave clap sign, very good, and let you go on with your presentation. So welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you, Barbara. I do want to say it is Duplin County. We are famous for wine and the world's largest frying pan. So, all right, let me see if I can get this screen sharing. I am usually the person behind the screen when we do webinars, so I'm going to try not to screw this up. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome.
Looks like we can.
Okay, I am going to be very brief because I think questions are usually a good part of these discussions, but we wanted to talk a little bit about best practices for voter education. Now, I do work for the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, but I have been an election administrator longer than I have been a member of this center. So I'm going to probably lapse into my elections administrator mode, so forgive me. It is very much like a teacher mode. I do want to take a few minutes to talk just about the RCVRC and what our mission is. I do not expect anyone to read this entire paragraph. It's on our website. We started as a contract project with FairVote. Two of our members, Gary Bartlett and George Gilbert, started with FairVote in 2015, working on a project of how voters deal with ranked choice voting. There's a much more detailed explanation of that, but from that grew the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. And in 2018, we started the process of creating our own 501c3. Our official IRS name is the Election Administration Resource Center, and we do business as the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. And our goal, mission, in the very short form, is to collect, create content to help people as they begin to understand, implement, and administer ranked choice voting. Because we are 501c3, we try to stay very cognizant of not being true advocates because we do not want to lose our status. But we do work frequently with advocates in helping making sure that they're getting good, clear, consistent information, which you'll hear a little bit more about in just a second. Some of the current projects that we are working on that may be of interest to everyone. We are in the last stages, which I have realized are now the most painful stages, of a new website, rcvresources.org. You can see some of it if you go to that address. Caveat, it's not finished yet. So please understand that we will be making changes almost hourly to it in the next week or so. If you have any feedback, we're happy to hear it, but we are going to be making some changes. The RCV Universal Tabulator, some of you may have heard of this before. If not, it's quite okay. A lot of times, probably one of the main arguments or concerns we hear from especially elections administrators and policymakers, legislators, is that implementing ranked choice voting is too expensive. We'll have to change equipment. We don't want to buy new equipment. We can't afford new equipment. And the current system we have just won't handle RCV. So our group, and working in conjunction with a group of very talented programmers out of San Francisco area, the Bay Area, started working on its open source software. It is free. And if your voting equipment can produce a cast vote record, which is a very detailed spreadsheet for lack of a better explanation, if your machines can produce that, then we can use the universal tabulator to tabulate your ranked choice voting election. So, and when I say that, I say that we can do that in seconds, not hours, days, or weeks, as you sometimes hear about ranked choice voting. We are in the processes probably this week of sending the universal tabulator back to the federal testing lab, which will start the process of getting the newest version of the universal tabulator certified under federal standards, excuse me. This will now allow that just about, I think there's only one major vendor in the United States that does not play well with the tabulator. So, and I think it's Dominion. I may be wrong about that. I'll double check it if anybody really needs to know that information. But the good news is all of the other big three out of the big four now work with the universal tabulator. We just finished recording the footage for a showcase video of this tabulator. We expect it to be finished early to mid-December, and we will be shouting it from the rooftops. We're working with McNabb Storytelling out of Atlanta, and he's doing a fantastic job. If you are not familiar with his work, just Google McNabb Storytelling and you will be amazed at his abilities. It's awesome. The other thing that we're working on, are state assessments. And what are state assessments? We really had a lot of questions, and one of the questions we had sent in before this conversation was how to get ranked choice voting in a particular state or in a particular jurisdiction. And we started thinking about all of the things that go into making making implementation possible. So we decided to do a state assessment for all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. And we are looking at a state's RCV readiness. Now, what constitutes RCV readiness? We're looking at their voting equipment. We're looking at their ability to centralize their ballot count, how well they can do that, or if there's anything they can do differently. We're looking at ballot design. And then we do address their administrative structure. Every state does things just a little bit differently, so we had to take that into account as well. This project should be finished by the end of the year. And our main goal for these assessments was to be able to provide people on the ground in individual states a snapshot of what has to happen in order to implement RCV, so that they can be informed, they can have good, efficient conversations with people in that state, whether it's voters, administrators, or policymakers, and be able to know where to start in their process, because every state's a little bit different. And then, of course, despite COVID's best efforts, we are continuing to provide outreach. This is one example of that. We are doing webinars. We have a podcast called RCV Clips. You can get it on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. And then, of course, like I'm doing this evening, meeting with various groups and jurisdictions. We were 100% digital before COVID because we all work remotely. We did have some adjustments just like everybody else did, but it was a little easier because really our working with each other didn't change a whole lot like it did for some groups. All right, let's talk about voter education now and in the future. This is where I'm going to go into election administrator mode and tell you all the things that elections administrators wish everyone knew as we get ready for a November general election, and probably one of the biggest ones we've had in recent history, of course. What is it and why do we need it? It's a little of a two-part answer. It involves teaching voters about how elections work. Voters need to understand the processes. When they don't understand the processes, they make mistakes, they fear it, or they just throw up their hands and refuse to participate, and we can't have that. And then, of course, the second part is helping them find their preferred method of participation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. The goal here is a confident voter who has a positive voting experience. Sounds easy? Sure, of course it is. Some common roadblocks that you may run into. I think probably everyone has considered these. Every election has its own personality. They are all different. I don't know how to describe it, but some move at a very fast pace and go by very quickly. Some last about 10 years. And you don't really know what you're going to get until you get neck deep in it. So just know that they are all different. There's just so much misinformation out there. And while that's not necessarily a new phenomenon, we have so many places now to get that misinformation that we didn't have 10, 20 years ago. Every state's a little bit different when it comes to their procedures. It can be hard to create a uniform across the board voter education plan if every state calls it something different, executes it somehow differently. That's where groups such as the League of Women Voters that has a national presence can certainly start the core values of a voter education plan, but it is going to take some nuances by each state to really get a good comprehensive voter education plan. And then, of course, while we're at it, let's throw in a pandemic too, as if it, because it's a little too easy without that. All right, how do we combat those roadblocks? Voter outreach has to be tailored to fit the election, the state, and sometimes even the jurisdictions. That one jurisdiction has one early voting place, another jurisdiction has 10. As I said earlier, each state does it a little differently than the other. And then, of course, you've got those individual personalities. Combating that, and this is the hard part, is getting that plan tailored to hit as many voters as possible. I recommend start early and create relationships with your administrators. Summer of a November general is not early enough. Most of your elections administrators have been living and breathing this election since December of last year. Please, 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 these folks are tired. They've been beat up, hopefully not literally. Going to them now is just going to get harder for them to get what they've got to accomplish in the next 3 weeks. So as you start to develop these plans, just think in terms of give them as much time as possible. And I promise you, most of them are very willing to work with groups because you can help take some of the pressure off of them to educate with enough time and preparation. Clear and consistent messaging. This is something that we fight for, even at the Resource Center. Is we all know with all of the misinformation and the thousands of places you can get it now, if your message is not clear and consistent from day one, the second that you change it, someone who may be working against your goals will settle on that and start to break it down and potentially damage your efforts. And we don't want to do that. Clear and consistent messaging from day one. I know it's hard, especially these days, for everybody to come to a consensus, but if the goal is a happy voter with a positive experience, you've got to have a consistent message. One of the things that, in my mind, as an administrator, COVID has done something even as bad as all the things it has done. In my mind, it's highlighted something we should have been doing all along, which was making plans, making an effort to not only get registered, but understand enough of the process that you can confidently cast your ballot and understand that it's being properly tabulated. Most elections administrators will tell you that we spend a lot of time prior to the election worried about having enough workers, worried about equipment, making sure it fires up and turns on like it's supposed to, especially during testing. And then what it boils down to is a lot of the things that happen on election day that cause the most heartburn are just voters not knowing where to go to their polling place, or thinking, hey, I went to this polling place last time, I should go to that same polling place again, only to realize that last time they may have voted early, but are waiting until election day and not realizing that their election day polling place is a different place because it's assigned based on jurisdictions or based on where they live. So the more pre-planning you can encourage voters to do, the more likely you are to get a positive voting experience. And one of the sort of unsung heroes of that process is not only do you get confident voters, but a happy voter, a positive voter, doesn't get on Facebook after voting and slam the jurisdiction for not doing the election the way they thought they ought to. So that helps. And we've got quite a mountain to climb with all of the divisiveness in the country right now, and all of the things that we see and hear on social media, that anything we can do to kind of chip away at that is, in my mind, worth doing. All right. So when it comes to alternative voting methods and voter education, also known as, do I have to change everything now? No, you don't. There is actually some really good news about that. If you have a good comprehensive plan for voter education in your state or jurisdiction, you do not have to completely change when you are introducing an alternative election method. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I work with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. I know there are other alternatives out there, but I don't spend a lot of time working with those. So most of my information is going to be coming from the ranked choice voting perspective. But again, access to the ballot and getting the voter to vote does not usually change when you introduce a new alternative election method. They still have to register. They still have to decide whether or not they're going to vote by mail, vote early, or vote on election day. And generally speaking, that process will not change. So if your voter education plan is clear up to that point, you're not going to have to change that. You will need to add some information about the method itself. And my recommendation there is know your audience. Most voters just want the facts. Now, we could have an entire conversation about how to tabulate RCV or how to mark a ballot or design a ballot. But for the most part, when we've talked to voters about using ranked choice voting, it's been met with a fairly positive outlook. Generally speaking, they don't have a lot of trouble with the ballot design. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well too. But overall, know your audience and know how much information they need or want, and be able to tailor it accordingly. And just some common questions that we get about ranked choice voting. Let me move this over here so I can see what I'm reading here. Ranked choice voting is confusing or hard to understand. We hear that one a lot, especially from policymakers, because policymakers were once candidates, and candidates don't want to risk their voters being confused and not being able to vote for them. But one of the things that we've done is in December of 2019, and you can read or listen to all about this on our January 2020 podcast of RCV Clips. We gave 500 middle school students a ranked choice voting ballot. We gave them no voter education prior to. The only information they had was what was printed on the ballot as instructions. And 90% in the post-voting survey said, this is not hard. I had no trouble navigating the ballot. And that mirrors most of what we see when we've done research with ranked choice ballots with disability voters. We're going to be doing ranked choice voting with marginal voters, whether it be economics, race, or ability. That will be coming, I think, in early 2021. And as much as you hear that it's confusing and it's hard to understand, when it comes to marking their ballot in the polls, we just don't see a lot of confusion from voters. Not to say it's 100%, but it's generally overwhelmingly positive. Our voting equipment can't handle RCV. I talked a little bit about the RCV universal tabulator at the beginning. There are a few instances, especially jurisdictions that have what we term legacy, which is another word for old. In a few instances, new equipment may be required, but that number is slowly declining as we get into more and more elections. The universal tabulator, which is free, may be an option for jurisdictions. We can, and we are certainly willing, if a jurisdiction is looking at implementing RCV, we are happy to talk with them and figure out what equipment they have and what the necessary changes might be required in order for them to successfully implement a ranked choice election from a tabulation standpoint. We also get, it's going to take forever to know who won. Keep in mind that election results, regardless if it's a plurality election or a ranked choice voting election, or any election for that matter, results that are released on election night are unofficial. And because in almost all cases, even on election night, there are still ballots that may be coming in. There are provisional ballots that have to be adjudicated and voted or counted, excuse me. You may have some military ballots that are still eligible to come in. And so that time between election night and certification or canvass, it's called different things in different states. The biggest thing that we suggest to jurisdictions is make sure that process between those 2 points in time is as transparent as possible, and understand that, there are going to be things that change from time to time, but with good equipment or the tabulator, we can tabulate those results in a matter of minutes, not days. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I know it's a very high level view of voter education. Probably the biggest takeaway that I want everybody to kind of come away with is we've got to make sure we create voters that are confident and have a positive experience. There are a lot of things, whether you are voting as we have always voted with a plurality election or an alternative election method, there are just some parts of the voter education process that is the same. And we've got to create good, comprehensive plans and then tailor it from there with any of the election methods that we are talking about. One of the pre-questions that was asked was how to follow election laws and litigations. And I realize this slide is like completely out of place from what we've been talking about, but I asked our policy director, Chris Hughes, if he could give me a couple of sites that would allow people to just kind of keep track of the different lawsuits and litigation that's going on. And he gave me these 3. And I will give, Barbara, I will give you these so you can distribute it as
Excellent.
As necessary. I know it's kind of hard with this being a screen share that you can't like click on them or anything. But he recommended these 3. And then of course, please understand that take from them what you will. They are suggestions and not necessarily the only places you can look. And just as the last thing before we start questions, how to contact us. So I've got our website. We have webinars on our website that you can watch. They are all there. If you have any specific questions, want to reach out to us directly, there is our email info@rcvresources.org. As I've said before, we've got RCV clips on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. And we are also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And that's the end of my commercial.
Thank you, Rosemary. I hope that others, although muted, I laughed out loud at a couple of your humorous, dry humor, but very good. If you want to stop sharing your screen, sure. Perhaps maybe all of us can see you in speaker's view as well. A lot of people, I don't know if there's a lot of questions on the chat, and we'll get to them if we can, but I also wanted to make sure that we answered some that had already come in. And nice of you, you already incorporated some of those into what you had to say. So yeah, so that's helpful, yes, and practical. One of your comments was the pandemic. Without the pandemic, it would just be too easy. And that did make me laugh out loud. And it brings me to one of the questions here. It says, can you please share strategies for voter education in a pandemic, and how do you identify people to invite to your Zoom meeting? That was
Well,
good questions.
it is a good question. I've got two points on that, and I was going to, my biggest suggestion, with the social distancing and the masks and understanding that some people are just uncomfortable congregating in public now, and that's fine. Start early. I mean, that's always going to be the answer, is please start early, talk often. I'm looking at my notes, sorry. Use social media, and use it effectively. We've noticed a lot, because we've tried a few different things with our social media to see what generates more action or more activity than others. People like a call to action. So if you can provide a video, if you can provide, hey, go look at this link for more information, people tend to react more to that than just saying, here's how you get a ballot. And that, I know for us with the RCV Resource Center, when everything got shut down, because we used to go to tons of conferences and things like that, and we haven't been to any, we had to find a different way to talk to people. It's not impossible to do in the COVID age, but it is going to be a little more elbow grease and feet on the ground as much as possible. There are some groups out. We just recently talked with someone that's been heavily involved in the Massachusetts initiative. And they had to run in because they had a signature requirement in order to get on the ballot. So they ran into, well, how do you get signatures when you've got COVID? And they had to modify their plans some too. And one of the things they did is they found more volunteers to go out, which allowed them to reach smaller groups. So there's a formula to it, and we're all trying to figure out what that formula is to maximize engagement when we can't engage in person like we've become accustomed to, but it is not impossible to do.
I just want to add in something there, because in Oregon, we were trying to get an initiative on the ballot, and ultimately we failed for other reasons, but we were able to get a situation where we were doing it online. Getting signatures online. People would print out their own one-person room and then send it in. So that was pretty terrific.
That's awesome.
Go ahead.
I have lost my train of thought. So
sorry.
Oh, I know what it was. I remember now. I had the opportunity, because I have a dear friend that works at the state Board of Elections, and I had the opportunity in, I think it was July, to travel with her to some of the polling places in Western North Carolina that had a second primary. And because the second primary fell obviously during the COVID shutdown and everything, they were some of the first polling places in North Carolina to have to use the PPE and implement the social distancing standards that a lot of people will see come early voting and election day on the 3rd. And again, it was a second primary, so the number of people was significantly smaller than what we're probably going to see in November. But understand that the people working in this polling place and the elections directors that I got to work with and have worked with for years were doing so much more than what was really required to protect the voters and to protect their poll workers. And people can make their own decisions about how they want to execute their ballot, and I have absolutely zero judgment for whatever decision they make. But I felt very safe in that environment. And again, with pre-planning, knowing what polling place you're supposed to go to, getting your sample ballot early and being able to quickly and efficiently mark your ballot and not extend your stay, I think are all things that voters can do to help. But the polling of election officials that I've seen are doing a fine job of making the polling places safe.
Okay, I'm going to go on to another one, and I'm going to kind of combine these. And you may have already answered the first one. Would you explain how to educate voters about ranked choice voting? But you might want to add to it. And then the other one was, what practical measures can the average citizen take to implement ranked choice voting? They were talking about in Pennsylvania, but anywhere.
As far as educating people on ranked choice voting, I tend to approach it from two different perspectives. One, I try to break it up in terms of, let's talk about what is it that you want to know? Do you want to know how to mark your ballot? You know, it's effective to ask questions. Now, the voter may say may answer yes to all of my questions and may want to know everything from start to finish. But some voters may just want to know, how do I mark my ballot? What's it going to look like when I get there? Is it going to be so drastically different that I can't even mark it? No, not really. And it kind of goes back to my other comment about know your audience and know how to read how much they want to know. It usually boils down into two big questions. How do I mark my ballot, and how are they going to figure out who won? Marking the ballots, probably the best, one of the best ways to do that is to show them. Again, that's going to be a little more difficult with COVID and most things being digital or virtual these days. But, you could use certainly this platform to share a screen and show people how to mark that ballot. And then when it comes time to how do you tabulate, that's where establishing that relationship with your local election administrator is going to come in real handy, because those individuals are going to know way more about tabulation. It's going to be more concrete coming from them. It's not going to be speculation quite as much. So that's how I would approach it, and making sure you've got that relationship, because if a question gets asked about a very detailed part of how we tabulate, having that relationship allows you to pop an email or pick up the phone and call that election administrator and say, how is this going to be interpreted?
Mm-hmm.
As far as getting the ranked choice voting in a particular state, because every state is not only different in terms of elections administration, it is sometimes different in how you get things to become law or policy in the state. And that is going to be a very state by state answer. The state assessments that we're working on will be helpful, because it does talk about how individual states, some states require a ballot initiative, some states just require a law that is signed into, or a bill that is signed into a law. Some states require that law to be started by signatures. It just varies from state to state to state. And we're happy to talk with anyone that really wants to know, and we can certainly hunt down the answer for that and be able to give them a little bit more concrete about what they will be facing in their particular area.
That's good to know. This person was wondering about the mechanics of ranked choice voting or range voting in relationship to hand-marked ballots. And can they do recounts? I think they're trying to ask, can the recounts be done on machines, and can they be done probably by paper ballot too, was the question, I assume.
You can hand count ranked choice voting ballots. I don't recommend it. But then again, I don't recommend hand counting any ballots, but that's the thing. You can, I think Minneapolis does ranked choice voting for their city elections, and I think they do still count them by hand. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you're in a jurisdiction that is going to have significantly more ballots than a couple of hundred or maybe a couple of thousand, trying to hand count that is, do what you got to do, but I wouldn't recommend it. You can recount ballots. One of the things that people sometimes don't realize, and you probably wouldn't if you don't work in the administration side of it, is most states actually have policies or laws written into their election statutes that will outline how recounts are called, how they are counted, how they are handled. Can they be counted by machine, or do they have to be counted by hand? In North Carolina, and forgive me, I may misspeak, but at one time you could only ask for a recount if it was within a certain margin, and that margin had to be pretty small actually. And then if that recount did not change, or if it changed the winner, I think you had to go to a hand count, and so Ranked choice voting does bring its own set of requirements, but we also would have to work within the state guidelines towards those recounts. So for me to say, generally speaking, yes, you can, or no, you can't, is going to be subject to what that state requires.
Okay, thanks. A couple people had asked about the Electoral College, and I'm going to apologize to them right now that we're not going to cover that subject. And I do want to remind everybody that the League of Women Voters has a national position that incorporates two avenues of approach, and that is to have a constitutional amendment to overcome the Electoral College. Which of course would take a very, very, very long time, as been seen by the ERA and other things. And the other avenue is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which we also support. And I mentioned I was on the task force for it. And we have a lot of information online about that, but we're not going to ask Rosemary to deal with those questions as well right now.
I wish I had an answer for you, but
one question that's important before we get off, even though there's others still to come. How much hand-holding would the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center be able to offer leagues around the nation wishing to work on advocacy for this issue? And we realize, manpower is an issue everywhere, so that's the question.
okay. Well, I do have to say, as a matter of importance, we are a 501c3, so we try to stay away from advocacy as much as possible. But we do try to work with groups such as the League of Women Voters and others to, as they develop their policies and their procedures and how they want to approach voters and other groups about ranked choice voting, we are certainly available to look at materials, provide materials. Anything on our website is for public consumption. If there's something on our website or language on our website you want to use, by all means, please do so. We are a small group. We're hoping to grow a little bit, hopefully if we can get the funding that we need to do that. But we are happy to get on a Zoom call. We're happy to do a webinar. We are happy to participate in any way possible to help get this, get ranked choice voting used, or at least if a group is going to implement it, making sure that they have a successful implementation. That's one of our biggest goals.
Excellent. And I'm sure that a lot of people on this call won't forget you said that. I know I won't. Here are two questions related. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but how many states are currently, or cities, areas are using ranked choice voting? And how many states are currently encouraging or allowing mail-in voting?
Okay.
Two very different.
Okay. I'm going to take the second one first.
Okay.
There are 5 states right now that do all of their elections via mail. Colorado, I wrote it down. I won't rely on my memory. Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, and Washington. And then all 50 states allow for some version of mail-in absentee. Now, some states require that you have an excuse, and some states are pretty strict about that excuse. And then there are other states that you can go vote early if you just want to. So I encourage people to look at what their particular state rules are on that. I can tell you that North Carolina specifically, just because that's where I am, I've not noticed any sort of strong coming from the State Board of Elections push to get ballots by mail. In our case, it would be absentee voting, not mail or mail for everybody. But there has been a lot of third-party groups that have encouraged it. I get mail almost every day, and my ballot's been in for almost a month now. That both sides are encouraging people to do whatever means necessary. And I'm seeing that make a plan statement coming from both sides of the aisle, if you will, to don't wait till the last minute to figure out how you're going to cast your vote. If you want to do it by mail, fine. If you're going to do it in person, that's fine too. And if you can repeat the first question again.
How many places is ranked choice voting being used?
I do not have that statistic memorized. However, there is a place on our website it's under our RCV 101 top nav that talks about where it is used in the United States. And there is a brief mention of the few places that it's used in the rest of the world.
Right. Paul and I used to have those places memorized, but as the list grew and grew and grew and grew, there is no chance of that anymore.
I can tell you the list is longer than it was when I started. So at that point, I just decided, I'll know where that information is and not commit it to memory.
Okay, this partly you've already answered, but there's a little part you might want to weigh in on. It says, in theory, I like ranked choice voting. Where it's used, do people adapt to it quickly? And I think you kind of said yes in that, and how popular is it where it's used? I don't know if you know that.
Well, it would be pretty hard to give a percentage or a number, but I can tell you that every time this question has come up or some form of this question has come up, we have not really, most people adapt to it quickly. You're always going to get someone who just doesn't like it or whatever, but the majority of individuals not only adapt quickly, but like it because they feel like they've got a little bit stronger voice in saying, I want this person to be my representative for whatever office we're talking about. So generally speaking, we've not seen a lot of negative pushback from it. And as it grows, it's, we're excited to see what the next group, the newest group of inductees into the ranked choice voting world, how they feel about it. But overall, it's been pretty positive.
Great. Paula, did you want to share some questions that are from the chat?
Yes, a couple things from the chat, Rosemary. Marcus in Boulder they have an ranked choice voting initiative on the ballot, and he would like you to double check with the universal tabulator that may not work right now with Dominion and get an estimate as to when that capability will be added.
Okay.
And then there's a question from Betsy McBride from Idaho, who says, what's the selling point for a one-party dominated state like Idaho? And I know in other one-party states like Utah, it has been used in the nominating process by the Republican Party for quite a while. But
right. That is not a question I have been asked before. So good job on that, on asking that. One of the things I would say is for a lot of jurisdictions, ranked choice voting is still used primarily in municipal elections that, it varies from place to place, but a lot of these are not usually partisan elections. So, can I honestly sit here and say, well, if it's a one-party state, don't bother. As we've all know in talking to people over the years, even within a party, there can be large differences between platforms and what's important to them as a candidate. So if you're looking to identify a candidate, regardless of their party, who best identifies with the most people, it's still reasonable to think that ranked choice voting might afford them that ability to do that. But I honestly don't know if there is any research on that, and I will jot that down to run it by our policy director.
Good answer. The greatest level of representation. That's what we're looking for. Paula, I did miss a question that basically I think that Rosemary answered, but in general, it's asking, do you support other methods, or what other methods do you support? And I think you were saying you don't really work with other ones, but
I don't spend enough time to talk about them effectively. Sorry.
Okay. Paula, are there others?
Yes, from Cindy Madigan. When will we know what the results are of the Washington State Readiness Assessment? Cindy's from Washington.
I think, let me see if I have already done that one, or if it's, because it is in my hopper to do the final edits, moving it into the template. So I hope we are planning on doing a full release at the end of the year. But if anybody asks really, really nicely, I could share that with individual states. It's not a big secret. We're not trying to, keep them from anybody. We were just trying to get them all finished, and it has turned into a huge project. It's been a good project, but it's been a huge one. But if someone really would like to see the Washington or any other state, we'll be happy to talk to them.
So Cindy, contact Rosemary.
Did you have another, Paula?
Oh, just a comment also from Washington, from Cindy Black. We could use it sooner in Washington State, as we are going to push legislation in January.
I got you, Cindy. I'll if you'll just reach out to me so that I have your email. If you'll just shoot me an email at info@rcvresources.org, I'll be glad. And Barbara also has my email as well. So, and I don't mind that email being shared, Barbara, with anyone.
Okay, good.
If you want to just reach out to me, I'll see what I can do to get to you a little sooner.
Okay.
And then Jean Hopkins was asking how many cities use ranked choice voting. And I think you tried to cover that. At least you said where you could find them all. It is a really growing list. So
it is. We're hoping that we've heard some rumblings that maybe there will be a few more entities in Utah or cities in Utah that might be willing to take on ranked choice voting. I know Alaska and Massachusetts have ballot initiatives for November. We're hoping that those will go through as far as just furthering the ranked choice voting field, because then that means that's more content and more research for us that we can do. And then of course we're all
Marcia Watson's on the call here from Bloomington, Minnesota, where they have an active campaign going.
Awesome. That is awesome.
Paula, if we've finished all our questions, I'll ask Rosemary if she has anything more that she wanted to add. Were the questions all answered? Paula?
Oh, all the ones in the chat were.
Yeah.
So everyone else is muted. There might be some conversation that
well, they
want to be had. I know Marcia is live now, so she might have something to say there about Bloomington.
Okay, well.
Oh, someone is still entering the waiting room. Pat,
what can we say? Almost, yeah.
Bloomington and Minnetonka, Minnesota are both on the ballot and going well. We have a big fundraising event on this Sunday with Dean Phillips, our 3rd congressional district, who's a huge ranked choice voting supporter. He introduced the, Rosemary probably knows the name of the act in Congress to give money for states and cities that would like to do ranked choice voting. I want to say fair choice, but I don't think that's the name of it. It might be.
That actually sounds familiar. This is when I wish my policy director was sitting right here, because he would rattle it off and give citations, and watching his brain sometimes is scary.
Maybe we can get him on one of these calls.
You absolutely can, because he can go way into the weeds on things. But if there's anything we can help with in Minnetonka, we are happy to just do so. So just let us know. Yeah, that's Chris Hughes, our policy director. He is scary smart.
Yeah. So are you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, remember, for those who want to stay, we are going to have a very, very, very short video. But for just a moment, if everybody would like to unmute themselves and just show a little, Paula, yes.
One more comment. I think it's really good to hear this from Jean Hopkins, probably from Vermont. She says, Burlington, Vermont hopes to get it back.
Yes.
Great.
We did have it. It was called IRV when it existed. But then one party didn't like it because the opposite party came into being and elected the mayor. And so they voted it out.
And now actually our city council approved it and wanted to get it on the ballot for this November ballot. But the mayor vetoed it because he felt it was just impossible. And listening to Rosemary, and thinking about it, I agree with him that it would be better to put it on our town meeting ballot in March.
Mhm.
So we've got to get the support for it.
Well, good to end on a positive note
Yes.
of some support there. And as I
Right.
was about to ask if everybody could unmute themselves and just give a little clap to Rosemary, we'd really appreciate it. I think it would be very nice. And yeah. And for all of you who would like to stay, I am about to share that. And again, Rosemary, thank you so much for suffering through this first of our attempts at one of these meetings. And it was great to have you. So we really appreciated it.
My pleasure. Please invite me back anytime. I'm happy
Excellent.
to.
You-
My
you-
husband says, you can run your mouth as much as you want. So at least I have an audience now.
You better watch out because we remember these things.
It's a good thing he's cute. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, here is the video, if we can get it going.
And I put the link in the chat. early
Great,
on.
thank you.
For those that joined late, it's in the chat.
If you don't like how American politics is always left versus right and red versus blue and D versus R, can we just talk about the Olympics? Thank you. Or the Oscars or ice cream or just look at some Whitney Houston memes? United States of America. See, the Olympics only have one winner, but they give 3 medals. And when you can't choose just one flavor of ice cream, there's Neapolitan or the Tonight Dough.
And the Oscar goes to
Barbara, the video's not up on my screen.
Oscars decide who wins.
Oh,
Parasite.
I can hear it, but not
Ranked
see it.
choice.
Right,
are people not seeing the video?
right.
Right.
Just hearing.
Okay, hold on.
Start it over.
You'll need to do share screen.
Yep. I remembered to do one part and not the other. There we go. You can see it, the beginning of it now, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that.
If you don't like how American politics is always left versus right and red versus blue and D versus R, can we just talk about the Olympics?
Thank you.
Or the Oscars or ice cream or just look at some Whitney Houston memes?
United States of America.
See, the Olympics only have one winner, but they give 3 medals. And when you can't choose just one flavor of ice cream, there's Neapolitan or the Tonight Dough.
And the Oscar goes to
And it all relates to how the Oscars decide who wins.
Parasite.
It's called ranked choice voting, and it's having a moment.
But wow, what a moment. I will never forget.
But some people may have forgotten, or probably just never knew about something that happened 150 years ago in Massachusetts at MIT around 1870 with this thoroughly bearded professor named William Ware. Ware noticed a new type of voting emerging in Europe, and he tweaked it a bit, developing instant runoff voting. We now call it ranked choice voting, and Ware saw it as a way to improve voter satisfaction, writing, "It is to be remembered that it is in the interest of the voters, not of the candidates, that elections are carried on." That was 1872.
Back to present day, where I've got AR, augmented reality from NBC's emerging tech team, to help me explain what ranked choice voting is. So let's say you've got to choose between 4 candidates represented by these colored codes. You've got yellow, pink, green, and purple. Now only one of them can win, but instead of just voting for one, you're actually going to rank your top 3. I like pink the most, and then purple would be my second pick. If neither of them won, I could live with yellow, but I don't like green. So green is out. That is my ranking. Now let's see how everyone else voted. If one candidate gets a majority right away, that's it. The election is over. But in this case, there are 4 candidates and no one has a majority. So the one with the fewest votes, yellow, is going to be removed, and we'll see who those voters chose as their next pick. But that still doesn't give us a majority, so we're going to do that one more time. Now green has the fewest votes, so we're going to remove the green candidate and see who those voters chose as their next pick. That does give us a majority. We have a winner, it is purple, and that is how ranked choice voting works.
Since being first used in Denmark in the 1850s, it has slowly caught on. Australia adopted it in 1918, then Ireland in 1921. It came to American politics in 1915 in the small town of Ashtabula, Ohio. And now in 2020, it's used on some level in 26 states. 5 states are using it for the presidential race, which means many of the Democratic primary results from the month of April will be a result of ranked choice voting by mail. So that brings us to Maine, where ranked choice is already used statewide, but not everyone likes it.
I think from the very beginning, I thought it was complicated.
That's Dr. Demi Kazunas, the chair of Maine's GOP. I caught up with her on Super Tuesday as she proudly cast her vote for President Trump. Her party was also actively collecting signatures to repeal ranked choice voting at the state level, while Portland, the state's biggest city, had a ballot measure to expand it to all local elections. So I wanted to understand why Republicans in Maine are so opposed to it.
Folks are going to have a hard time ranking. They don't even know who's running. So I believe in one voice, one vote, one person. It's the American way. It's the bedrock of our American principles. It's always been the way it is. And we keep on trying to mess things up. I'm not sure the motives behind it, but to me, it complicates what should be a very simple process.
But does it? I asked some voters.
When you voted ranked choice for the first time, was it confusing to you?
No. If your first choice, isn't valid, then your opinion is still taken into consideration. It's not like just totally thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, why not? That seems a fair way to do it.
It makes people maybe think a little bit more about their choices as opposed to just one or the other.
The third parties, people are afraid to vote for us because they think, oh, that person won't win. But if there's ranked choice voting, people aren't afraid to vote their conscience.
You can actually vote your conscience and your favorite choice.
Everyone felt, I feel like, a little weird in 2016 and made a lot of people not even vote. And that just is the saddest thing, It's like we gotta vote. we gotta vote.
And by the next morning, Portland, Maine had voted overwhelmingly to expand ranked choice voting to all local elections by 81%. But what about the 19%? Well, this objection may reflect what's going on in their mind.
Yeah, the guy up in northern Maine won the election, and then they threw him out.
He had the most votes, but he didn't have a majority.
He had the most votes, period. All I have to say.
He's talking about this guy, former Republican Congressman Bruce Poliquin.
But since day one, this rank vote process has been a real problem.
Poliquin lost his re-election bid in 2018 in a ranked choice vote. In the first round, Poliquin had more votes than Democrat Jared Golden, but not a majority. So it went to a second round where Poliquin wound up losing to Golden.
And I think that it's relatively easy for partisans to look at a recent outcome and judge a system by how it might affect that outcome. But if you step back and look at it systematically, ranked choice voting is fully constitutional. This has been tested in court, very much in the spirit of one person, one vote.
Rob Ritchie co-founded Fair Vote nearly 30 years ago with one of its primary goals to give American voters more than just a choice of red versus blue.
We need to address the fact that voters want more from politics and that the current rules are really driving us in a dangerous direction of more polarization, more difference, and a lot of that is tied to a system where you can only vote for one person, a kind of an all or nothing approach. And ranked choice voting, we think, is a great solution to that.
And a solution gaining momentum, with New York City adopting it next year, along with smaller cities considering it, like Memphis or Sarasota.
And right here in beautiful San Diego, California, where there's a big push underway to let voters decide if they want ranked choice voting this November.
The feedback I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. And
I talked with San Diego Councilman Mark Kersey, who left the Republican Party to become an independent. And he's pushing for ranked choice voting in part because he's sick of partisanship.
It's kind of R versus D, red versus blue, like it always is. And I think that frankly, just keeps the partisan tensions at a high. And it'd be nice to diffuse some of that. And I think ranked choice voting would actually help with that.
And San Diego voters could decide on the November ballot.
And that brings us to the thing that has affected every American, the coronavirus, and the impact that might have on November's elections. So there's already some prominent U.S. senators who are pushing to allow every American to vote by mail. And if that happens, listen for ranked choice voting to be part of the conversation as a way to eliminate the need for any runoff. And if you're curious about where ranked choice voting is already used, where it's being considered, go to fairvote.org. They've got it all mapped out.
That's it. I don't know if people have any comments or questions they want to share. If they do, they can unmute themselves, and we have a few more minutes if you want to do that.
Barbara, I did forget to add that in Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada, our RCV universal tabulator was used in those Democratic presidential primaries.
Oh. And I got that right, Rosemary, right? This is a free tabulator for
it's open source software. There is no hardware component, but yes, it is free for anyone that might have some security questions about downloading software off the internet. We do have it encrypted with an ID key, so if you take the software and manipulate it, we will know, because it won't match our initial encryption. So we've taken as many steps as we can to make it secure, and we recognize that if you fiddle with it, you're doing so at your own peril.
Anybody have anything that they wanted to share or ask or whatever before we stop?
Hey, Rosemary, is that software take the place of Dominion equipment for tabulation?
No, ma'am. What it does is we don't tabulate anything from the voting equipment that is used in the polls and used by the election administrators to tabulate the results. The equipment will create what we call a cast vote record, which is a very detailed spreadsheet of what happens. So we don't actually see any ballots. We don't handle any ballots with that tabulator, but we do take that cast vote record and use that to count the RCV election by however many rounds is required to determine a winner. And we also have, and I didn't mention it and I am so sorry, is we have what we call RC Viz, which is a visualizer. You can upload the tabulator's results and it will show you in several different formats the round by round counting, and will generate reports and things. That one we have not spent as much time on as we have the tabulator. We're hoping that once we kind of get the tabulator through the testing rounds, we'll be able to turn our attention a little more to the visualizer.
Can you spell that, Rosemary, the RC Viz?
It's RCVIS.
We've been using
We've
been using OpaVote with our presentations to show people how the round of voting works. And that's, we just get on your smartphone and you can do it in a small group, or they do it at the state fair. And
there's also, I think this is from FairVote originally, but it's called, it's called rankit.vote. And that too can be used, in small groups or for small RCV kind of elections.
It's great that that's come up. Chris Hughes just recently wrote an article about all of the different virtual, like OpaVote, Rankit, and a couple others as to, he did a chart like how much it costs to use it, how many elections you can do for free, and how many you may have to pay for like a higher subscription level to get more features. So we're actually going to start including things like that on our website, where people can, we're not endorsing anything one way or the other, but we want to be able to present all of the different ways you can
spread the word and get the ranked choice voting out to your
Is
voters.
that article on your website as well that he did?
Is not. He just sent me the second draft this afternoon, so it will be coming.
We'll be interested to see that. Paula, you might want to take this one. Somebody asked, what's the league's position on RCV? Of course, we don't exactly have one, but you might want to answer that.
Oh, well, our national position is on the website. I don't want to read it right now. I guess I could put a link in maybe in the chat, but you can probably find it on the website. And California has a position as well as many other states. The position really primarily is supporting electoral systems that provide the greatest level of representation for voters. And so there's a list in the position of criteria that meet that level of participation. There are suggested criteria, and ranked choice voting is just happens to be one of the things that does meet a lot of the criterion. As there are other election systems that do as well. It's just that ranked choice voting is one that is used in public elections, and there is a lot of data that is out there because, for example, in my state, California, it's been used in San Francisco and in the Bay Area since 2004. So there's some good data about what the results are and how it's helped give voters more choices, how it's helped elect more minorities, how it's helped elect more women. So our position supports it.
I don't want to get in the weeds about how the league takes positions, but can a local league, for instance, support ranked choice voting legislation in its state without, if it adopts a program like that, a program position?
Well, the beauty of having a national position is that you can use that national position locally. So I would still recommend that you still study or look at ranked choice voting and maybe even other electoral systems just to educate yourself and your league members. But you're guaranteed that you can be supportive of ranked choice voting based on our national position.
Okay.
What state are you in, Tricia?
Illinois.
Oh,
Illinois has a fairly active fair vote group, and there is some proposed legislation which they don't, is not a focus right now because they need more local support and statewide support before they start trying to push state legislation. But
maybe you can be part of that. You and your local
I've
league.
already joined. I think it's a great idea for breaking this deadlock that we're in.
Well, I promised Rosemary about an hour and 15 minutes, and we are right at that point. So Paula, I'll ask you if you have anything else that you wanted to add.
Just want to thank you. Thank you, Barbara, and say this is the first in our series of conversations about electoral reform. And after we get through this election, all of you can look for other conversations like this on these topics for us from us after the first of the year. And we would welcome suggestions from you too about how to keep this going, because these are interesting times and these are interesting solutions, and they're solutions that make voters happy. So and increase participation, we hope. That's our goal.
Yep. Thank you again, Rosemary, and we really appreciated it. And we'll say good night to everybody and enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Bye. All the best, Marcia.
Thank you. I'll be talking to you.
Good luck. Good luck to everybody with good ballot measures on. Bye. Thanks, Rosemary.
Anytime.